Okay, so let's start. Welcome all of you for today's webinar about knowing Azure storage, and very interesting topic to be covered. And again, we have for today's webinar, our speaker is Mr. Afzaal Ahmad Zeeshan as a Microsoft MVP, and for briefing a small intro about Dear Azure. So we in Dear Azure we try to have an platform for all the Azure learners to be to make a simplest learning path for Microsoft Azure, and we do host webinars mainly during the weekends with different topics, and this webinars are mostly presented by the Microsoft MVPs or the experts from Microsoft themselves. So I will not take much time. I will request Afzal to take over and start with the webinar. Afzal, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kasam, for a very kind and a generous overview of mine first, and then Dear Azure as well. And welcome everybody else to this webinar of ours. In this webinar, we will be discussing Azure Storage and why basically someone should care about what Azure Storage basically is. In the previous webinar, we actually talked about serverless programming with Azure functions. So in this part, we will also take a look at the development side of the cloud storage or the storage services or the storage solutions on the cloud. And we will take a look at what Azure actually has to support in case of the storage services, such as what kind of data can you store in the services, or once the data has been stored, what kind of features or flexibilities would you receive if you are using Azure Storage instead of any other cloud storage vendor. So I will be sharing my screen right away. So please let me know if you guys can see my screen. Let me know when you guys can see my screen so that I can continue. So since I okay, so thank you, Ruxar. Actually, basically, what Azure Storage has been to me as a developer, basically Azure Storage was something that I can look up to when I'm basically trying to consider solutions like um, when I have to keep some caches, or when I have to store some images, or when I need to like perform some sort of operations on the data before actually moving it back to the data sources or to archives, for instance. So Azure Storage basically since the day of its advent has taken a very special place in my heart as well as my list of the topics to learn. The reason behind that is because Azure Storage itself provides not just a mechanism to store the services, but also in order to process them, or in and or to be or in order to say that basically Azure Storage provides you with the capabilities in which you can store the data in structured as well as non-structured format. And when we talk about the structured format is also not one sort of a structure. It's different kind of structures, such as you can store the documents, you can store information like messages, and you can even store data that has to be fetched pretty quickly and pretty neatly. We will be talking about all of this in a minute. So basically, a general introduction of mine would be that my name has already been mentioned by Kasam, and I am an MVP at C Sharp Corner Core Project in Microsoft. I'm mostly a community kind of a guy. I work and collaborate in several communities. GitHub, Code Project and C Sharp Corner has already been mentioned. I was recently appointed as a chapter lead for C Sharp Corner's Lahore chapter. So if anybody from you is from Pakistan, you can definitely join me in one of our events that we organize locally. And I'm also an author at Pact, and I'm also an author with Dear Azure. So let's start with a formal introduction of the cloud storage. Basically, um, cloud storage is cheap. The reason behind that is you can scale your cloud storage, your storage solutions to as much extent as you want. You can decrease them, you can increase it, you can scale it, you can replicate it, and do all kind of uh, like you can do anything with the cloud storage that you would actually do with your own storage solution, like your own hard disk, your own USB devices, and all. But the primary thing that with the cloud storage is that it is easier to migrate the storage from one endpoint to another. Like for example, you cannot afford to have your USB devices sent from one region to another region pretty easily. And in most regions, it's not even supported. I'm still waiting for my USB drive to come from India that I actually won from C Sharp Corner. And so that these are a few of the issues that with storage you have to face. You cannot share your CD disks, you cannot share hard disks, you cannot do anything with the storage. And like the GDPR has just arrived, and basically with that it's even more strict to have your data out of Europe. So what basically you would do is you would actually try to use some sort of a vendor. And I'm talking about all of this stuff which is legal. You can do anything which is illegal, and that is quite possible as a solution. But since we're talking about the legal stuff, basically you would definitely need some sort of a mechanism where you can transfer your data, and you can allow your customers and consumers to receive the data. You can allow them to actually store their data in that storage environment. So what you can do basically with the cloud storage is that you can use the services, the infrastructure from a cloud vendor such as Microsoft Azure, or there are other several service providers. And the concept of the storage as a service, storage as a service, is not newer. Basically, the concept was already available during the times of Google Drive, or even before that, in such as the service box or the Mediafire. All of these services basically do the same thing. They provide you with a storage amount, like a few gigabytes or so. And what you basically do is you store all of your data onto their services, and then what you do is that basically you just pay them. Most of these services are they require you to pay them for the services. Most of them don't require the payment. They use advertisements or other sort of monetization options. But the primary thing with Azure Storage is that the cloud storage, the addition of the feature, the most beautiful feature that came with Microsoft Azure or for other these most recent cloud storage solutions was that the storage became programmable. The reason behind that is that if you take a look at the storage solutions that were provided with Box or Mediafire, was that basically it was just a storage, and you would just store the files, you would just extract the files, and that's it. And even if they did provide an SDK, the SDK only provided the solutions with the with that you can only store the data, and then you can only download the data. And all of that was done programmatically, meaning that you can create your own applications, you can write your own programs or scripts and do all that kind of stuff programmatically. But the thing is that data was no longer being able to be programmed. You cannot program the data, you cannot program how the data is to be stored, where the data has to be stored, and how it actually sits under the hood. And with the advent of cloud storage, basically that also became a very common thing to be done in the storage environments. And that is pretty much it for what we're going to be discussing in the following slides. And also we're going to take a look at how we can do that in the Azure portal as well as the Azure Storage Explorer. And since I was talking about the fact that Azure Storage Service supports structured as well as non-structured environment, the meaning behind that is that the concept of the storage was always a blob storage service. Uh, Blob service storage basically, uh, the concept of the blob is like you can save all of your files onto the disk. You provide they provide you with a storage mechanism. You provide them the file. They receive the files as they upload stream, and then it's there, and then it's available on the internet. You can download it, you can send the link to anybody else, and they can download it as well. But the thing is that Microsoft actually took it one step ahead. What they did with the data was that they actually saw most of the times people were storing the data in terms of like, for example, they were storing JSON documents, they were storing XML files, they were storing other kind of the data that actually was stored in the form of a blob, as in terms of the binary content, but it wasn't necessarily meant to be a binary content. Basically, it was meant to be something like that. And one of the reasons that I personally believe was that other services, such as the services on the cloud, are pretty much expensive and people cannot afford those services. So what they do is that they typically dump all of those documents. So what they do is they typically dump all of those documents in the storage service, such as the table service or the queue service, uh, for the messages, and then they continue to just fetch it over from there. And that is one of the problems with that. If you just dump a document with a name on it, and then you extract and process that document, that takes a lot of time. So what Microsoft did with that was that they introduced another concept of table storage. And with this, you dump the same binary content, but basically in a structured format. And then Microsoft Azure does the rest of the stuff, such as adding the keys to it, partitioning the data, indexing the data so that you can fetch the information pretty quickly. And then they also saw that basically most of the times what users would do is that users would try to store the information, and then they would try to follow the date time or the timestamp to actually see which of the data they have to fetch next. Like for example, if they are storing the data every minute, so they would actually follow the timestamp to which of the data was previously processed and which of the data they need to look for, like in the next minute or 5 minutes or so. So what Azure actually started supporting was that you can now create a queue, and then you can have the data ingested inside that queue, and some other service such as an Azure function or any other serverless or event or service can listen to the updates to the Azure storage queue, and then they can actually process the information that is stored in this storage queue. So these are the most important uh, services that Azure Storage provides, and you can definitely utilize them in your own applications. I personally have a lot of my own applications that currently utilize the power of Azure Storage services, and they are complete applications and they are complete solutions that run on top of Azure Storage. Then there is this most unique or ambiguous kind of a service, which is file storage service. The reason I'm calling it unique is the fact that it has nothing to do with the blobs or tables or queues. It has everything to do with the infrastructure level services. The top three services, blob, table, and queues, they are much more like the PaaS level services because you can directly program on top of them. The file storage service has a direct link with the infrastructure level services such as the virtual machines. You can create the files to be mounted on in the virtual machines. You can create the disks. You can anything that like you create in the virtual in the infrastructure level comes directly from the file storage, but however it is stored in the blob format. The reason being is that blob is a highly customizable structure that Azure Storage provides you with. So you can create different kind of blobs. You can create page blobs. You can create I don't actually remember all those names of them, but there was like a page blob and then append blob. And so these are kind of the blobs that you can create, and those blobs then provide you with the services such as fast access to the blocks. And we will also see them. We will also study the overall structure of the blob in the coming slides. The most beautiful feature of Azure Storage, as I find it, is the data redundancy. Otherwise, Azure Storage actually provides a lot of services such as the Azure CDN. It provides the virtual networks for the privacy and for the security purposes. It provides custom domain names and other kind of services which I believe are at a par level when it comes to the level of Azure as an infrastructure and as a platform. But however, I really believe that like the data redundancy and the replication models that are supported in the Azure Storage service. There are four models that are supported in the Azure Storage, and they are locally redundant storage, they are zone redundant storage, geo-redundant storage, and read access geo-redundant storage. The difference between them is that it also requires somewhat of a concept of the data centers, regions, and the racks of the machines. So it goes something like uh, and yeah, for to the audience, if you ever stumble upon something that you don't understand, please do ping me, and I will definitely answer your questions. I don't want to lose you in the middle of the speech. So with the locally redundant storage, what happens is that basically your data is stored inside the racks, and at most it is replicated inside that same rack or same place where the data primarily gets stored, or wherever you have to upload it. With the zone redundant storage is that basically inside that same data center, it is replicated at multiple instances. So which means that if like Azure ever has to upgrade the racks or machines or hardware, they don't actually end up turning your own service off, because in case of the locally redundant storage, if they have to upgrade a partition of the data center or some of the resources, and your data happens to exist on that part, basically your data might go down in that case for as long as it is updating. In case of zone redundant, it will make sure that your data is not on the racks that are meant to be upgraded or updated at the same time. So basically, it has an improved high availability concept, but still it's not that much as much you can as much as you would definitely try to um afford as a service provider, because most of the times when you will be providing the services for the storage, you might have other customers building their own services on top of you. So it comes down to you as well, because if the service from Azure goes down, then your service goes down, and ultimately your customers services might also go down. Then the third and the highest level of redundancy comes in, which is the geo-redundancy storage. And the geo-redundancy means that your data will be replicated on different data centers that are like several kilometers apart. So even if an entire data center goes down, or an entire region goes down, your service will still be up. Which means that, for example, if your if your storage is being replicated in North America, the other region might be, let's say, West Europe or something around that. But they will make sure that even if an entire region goes down, your service doesn't go down. Then there is this fourth kind of level, replication level, which only means that users will be able to directly access the secondary endpoint as well. In all of those three other service redundancy models, what happens is that your users or even you cannot access the uh, duplication endpoint. So the secondary region is not accessible to you directly. Azure will automatically make sure, and it will automatically load balance and fall back to the other region once it checks that the service is down or whatever. But what happens with the read access is that you have the endpoints for both of them, and you can easily access them. You can access the primary service as well as the secondary service as well. The reason behind the replication and redundancy models is that I typically think of it as it supports high availability of the services. It supports the high availability of your own services. It provides the high availability of the data as well, because most of the times now your service is provided on two endpoints, and you can choose whether you want to use the primary or the secondary region in case depending upon where your customer is coming from. However, it is not a solution for the load balancing or for the caching purposes. So you cannot expect the Azure service to provide high availability as well as load balancing between the two regions for your customers, because that is what Azure CDN is there for. And we will see in the portal that you can easily configure the Azure CDN for your blob services, so that the Azure CDN will be now taking care of how the data has to be cached on several endpoints on the globe, and then all of your users will be automatically shifted uh, at the DNS level to to the nearest region where they can access the resources, and most of the data will already be cached, so they won't have that much of a load on your Azure endpoints as well. So it's much more like that. You won't be charged for any bandwidth consumption as well. So that is what Azure CDN is there for, and this region has nothing to do with the load balancing or caching purposes. Now let's talk about the blob storage. Basically, as I just mentioned that the blob storage is the storage that is the primary kind of storage, not just in Azure Storage, but in any kind of storage provider, because blob storage consists of the tools and the frameworks that are required to store, to index, and to make the data highly available. For example, I just mentioned the fact that the VM disks and for other services, the blob storage is used. The reason behind that is that blob storage also provides you with the type of blobs that can be around 512 kbs in size. Such a small size is really very easier to be fetched from anywhere across the globe, and it also means that you can automatically index any blob from the range of like any size, and you can easily quickly read and write all the content from it. The reason behind that is because blobs also can be up to 4 MBs, the typical one block chunk I'm talking about. So they can be around 4 MBs. So if the VM disks are made up of those chunks, it will take a really very long time for an instance to download the blob and then append it to some sort of a RAM and then mimic it to be a virtual machine disk or something like that. But however, the thing with the blob storage over here is that they are specialized to be only at 512 kbs, which means that you can easily download it, you can use them for the disks, you can use them for any other purposes. So in the same manner, they're fine-tuned for the fast access, which we just talked about, and they are also fine-tuned to to be huge in sizes. I believe it is more than 4 point something terabytes in size for the blob storage, and same is the case for the table storage, and similar is the pattern for the queue storage. The overall limitation applies, which means that you can create like this many number of queues and this many number of tables, but the overall data that they can store is pretty much huge. Apart from the blob storage, the other services that are really very important and interesting to study are the tables and the queues. The files and disks typically are they only come in the infrastructure level, and I won't be going down much in that one. And pretty much they also require somewhat concept of the virtual machines, and they involve a lot of virtual machine stuff for the demonstration as well as for programmatically for uh, even with the SDK, you cannot do much with the files and for the disk services. So I will definitely talk about the tables, queues, and the blobs in this one. So for the tables, the case is that the tables are NoSQL databases, just like your MongoDB or other similarly or other similar NoSQL databases. And the tables, the premium tables, because like a year or 2 years ago, the concept of the Azure Cosmos DB was not yet available. So the concept of the premium tables was available, which meant that you will be provided with a higher SLA. You you will be provided with a few more services like replication and other stuff, which now has migrated and is now available under the Azure Cosmos DB suite. Then there is another concept of the queues, which basically are the low latency message ingestion services. If you have ever worked in the IoT or Internet of Things field, you will definitely know what the queues or the message driven patterns basically work and how they actually function. So similarly, we just saw that Azure Storage blobs, they also have a concept of the append blobs, the append only blobs. What they do is that you can only append at the end of the blobs. So similarly, just specializing that kind of blob service and making it accessible in the terms of a queue. So you append the message and the queue will automatically notify the service that is running on the other side that something is available, and it will automatically just pass on the information over to the other service, and things like that will happen. So this is a very cheap solution for that kind of a service as well. There are other services such as the IoT hub or the event hubs that are better optimized to serve the customers in case where are there when there are millions of messages coming up. Although queue storage service will be able to handle millions of messages as well, but there won't be that much of a guarantee over the sequence of the messages that arrive and how queue storage service will be able to handle and tackle them. So in those cases, basically event hubs or IoT hub or other service queuing or message ingestion services would be better as an option on the Azure storage on the Azure platform. But however, if you just want to use one single subscription or service, Azure Storage provides you with a mechanism or a feature in which you can store the messages in a sequence and process the information in a sequence as well. Such as if you have thousands of users and your users are continuously uploading their images, and now you want to let's say process the images and resize, create different sizes of the images and then store them in the container. You can have the images stored inside the queues, then run a function on back of them, resize them, store them in the container, and that is just one of the use cases over here. So that pretty much sums up how you can use different kind of information. And similarly, if we talk about how we can include the tables into this, you can save a record of all of the image that was just uploaded and tag it with the user ID and so on. So basically, it just depends upon how you want to use it. But overall, all of these services can be used in a very flexible and a cheap manner. And if we talk about the development side, since we talked about the fact that the development is the hottest topic in the overall cloud storage right now, because the cloud storage is not a new topic. The development side of the Azure storage is done. Microsoft, since we all know that they have made a lot of their own tools and platforms open source, we know that Azure Storage SDK is available for every runtime, almost every runtime and platform. And with the advent of .NET Core, basically we found out that we can now write the solutions and scripts in .NET and C Sharp and have them run on any platform that we might want. And similarly, there is REST API that is available for the Azure Storage service itself. I believe the REST API is much more for the infrastructure or operational side for the service. You can check the service status, you can check the usage of the service and other stuff. It also does provide you with the capabilities to upload the services and do all that kind of stuff, because the reason behind that is that the Azure Storage itself has its own protocol, which is which has been wrapped up in the Azure Storage SDK. And in case you ever want to utilize the development side of the Azure Storage, please do consider using the SDK. They are available, and for every popular language or platform or runtime out there, an SDK is available, and you can get it from GitHub easily. The REST API and then the connectors are available. The connectors basically are available for the IR functions or for the logic apps or for any other serverless approach. You can easily connect your Azure storage service with those services such as the Azure functions and have a trigger run for each time there is a new message in the queue, for each time there is a new blob uploaded in a container, or for any other services. And similarly, since we know that Azure functions are basically the development side counterparts for the logic apps, you would be sure that the logic apps can also do the same thing with the Azure storage service. Now, another major concern for most is what is the pricing for the service. There is no thumb of rule or rule of thumb, or there is no one single way in which a person can state that okay, this is the overall pricing for you, because just the way we discussed that Azure Storage itself is comprised of many services. There are blob services, there are table services, queuing services, then there is replication model, then there is a lot of other stuff. So it's like a whole buffet that you have to visit, and then you have to make some certain selections, and you have to choose which you have to utilize and which you have to let go of, and which service is more important, and so a lot of other stuff that goes on around during the selection of model you have to actually go on with. So that is why I'm just going to give you this link. Once you guys can definitely check this out, um, and you will find out what pricing Microsoft Azure has at the time when you hit this link, because definitely pricing changes. Microsoft recently also announced uh, a version 2 of their Azure Storage service, which already have almost like 75% of the pricing that was with the version 1 of it. And so it always changes. So I cannot give you an idea of what the pricing is, but basically it's like if you use 100 GB of storage, it's around $2 to $4 per month or something like that. So it's pretty much affordable. I believe so, because I'm using it and I really can I can say that yeah, it is affordable. And since we won't have enough time to go into the depth of every single service that is available with the Azure Storage or the Azure Storage SDK, these are a few of the courses. This is actually one of the course that I made with Azure Storage, and I go into the depth of everything, the blobs, the queues, and files, and everything. So you can easily get it from Pact or from the Udemy, and you can watch them, uh, and you can explore the services. The source code would also be made available on the GitHub. You can try out the SDK from over there and see how I actually explore the service all by myself. So now let's go ahead and take a quick overview of how we can create the services, what offers are made in the portal, and how we can connect to the service from the Azure Storage Explorer. Let's go back to the back here. Just like any other service, if ever you have to create another resource, you just go over to the Azure portal, you enter the service pane, you just click an add button to create the service. The creation process basically is pretty much simple. I personally enjoy the resource creation process with Microsoft Azure. The reason behind that is that the forms are pretty much neat. They are on a single page, unlike many other cloud solution provider. When you click on something, they take you on another page, and then they take you on another page. And the problem with that is that mostly I forget what I had entered on the previous page. But I enjoy working with Azure. uh, so I'll just go ahead and create a new service with something dear Azure. I'm not sure if the name would be available. Yeah, it is available still. Okay, so uh, pretty much it. As I discussed, the account type is that we have version 1, version 2, and blob storage. Blob storage basically means that we will only have the blob services. We won't have queue storage, we won't have table storage, or we won't have the file storage services. We will only have blob storage. With the version 1, basically this is the older version when other three kind of the services were also introduced, and this is like the legacy model. It is available for anybody who would want to use it, but the version 2 is now the recommended storage for storage solution, which is recommended by Microsoft, because it also supports other kind of tiers for the payment: hot, cool, and there is another kind of tier which is I believe archive. The archive tier basically means that you can store the data that has to exist for a really long run. And what you do is you just upload the data and you just archive it. Microsoft doesn't charge you for that data as much, because Microsoft knows that you're not going to utilize that data as much as you would want to utilize the data which has to be in hotter regions. So these are a few of the changes in the pricing that were made available in the version 2. So in case if any of you is interested in any of that, so you can check the details out of them. I would recommend personally for any newer project going out with the general purpose and version 2. You can select the location. Since after the GDPR, I always try to select Europe. But however, since Microsoft and the Azure is fully compliant with the GDPR, you can definitely go around with any of these services, and that will be totally fine. And I'm also not any legal person, so you should definitely consult any legal body for some recommendation or tips about GDPR. I'm not any legal person to say. And then another function that we have to select is the replication model for our services. The locally redundant and other services, the default is read access, and it's all fine. One point I might have missed back then is that the pricing also goes up the lower the down we go into that list. What I mean with that is that locally redundant will be the cheapest solution. The read access geo redundant will be the most expensive in the overall list. Performance standard means that your data will be backed up with the magnetic tape disks, such as the hard disks. Whereas in the case of premium storage service, your data will be stored on the solid state drives, which also has some improved performance, but also comes with some cost. Then there is this access tier, which I just discussed with you over here. Cool means that the data won't be that much accessed. Hotter means that the data will there would be a huge traffic, and the users would be accessing the data quite a lot. Secure transfer required means that your users would always have to access the data from HTTPS, and they can and any request from HTTP will be denied. Then the subscription, resource, and the virtual networks, and any other service that you might want to create. And I'm gonna be skipping it for right now. I'll just create a new resource group and the service account, and I'm just gonna create it. The creation process follows the same validation rules. It validates everything, the overall input. It checks whether you can create a new resource in that specific environment, and any other specific runtime check that it has to. Nice question, Rahul. Basically, data lake storage, data lake itself is a storage for the big data that Microsoft provides, where you can ingest data from multiple sources inside it. So, with the advent, like I just mentioned, that Microsoft saw that most users were trying to access their data differently. Some would be accessing it in a pattern where they were actually using documents. Some would be using the services in a pattern where they were trying to access the documents in a timely manner, and in a pretty much fashion, in a fashion in which there would be like a unique pattern that resembled not the cloud storage but any other kind of a service, such as in a pattern where the users were trying to store and access the data that was a documented data such as JSON or XML. And in most cases, what they were doing was they were trying to access the files in a manner like after 1 minute or 2 minute or 3 minute. And so Microsoft introduced table storage and other. I believe, I'm not speaking on behalf of Microsoft, but I believe that since Azure Storage is a very cheap solution to store the data, what people actually were trying to do was they were trying to dump all of their data, all of their files and everything, just like in Elasticsearch. They were trying to dump everything inside the Azure Storage, and so Microsoft may have realized that, okay, so many people are trying to use this service to dump big data. I'm not talking about the big data as a term. I'm talking big as in term of big and data as in term of big. So what they actually started providing was the service for the data lake. Data lake itself is a Microsoft Azure service. You can definitely check it out over there, and you will realize that basically it's a big data solution where you can ingest the data from multiple sources and then have all that ETL performed. So they are also providing the same service that you can enable that service on top of a storage account, and we can have everything done for you. So you don't have to actually write scripts or perform any kind of other service. So that is pretty much what they did. We will also try to explore other services that Microsoft provided as as an extra like cheese topping on top of the pizza offering that they have just provided us in this overall service. So I hope I answered your question because basically this service is currently in preview. It might not exist the next time we come, or it might be a fully approved service from who knows. So, anyways, this is the overall dashboard that we see. And as you can see, since we have the general purpose storage account, we have blobs, we have files, we have tables, and we have queues. We will be mostly spending our time in the blobs. And then we will also take a look at the tables. We won't have enough time to talk about the queues and files we just ignored previously. Then any like any other service, we have the monitoring features. We can easily set the alerts, uh, and just the way you can see over here, that basically we have the status of the services, the regions that our service is currently available in. Another beautiful feature that I actually enjoy about this storage provider is that they basically provide you with a storage explorer as well. I have been using the S3 buckets from AWS. I have also worked with Alibaba Cloud OSS. They don't even reach the beauty of Azure and the overall stuff. Can we Yeah, basically, oh, I'm not sure for the deletion. I believe for the deletion, you would have to go with the Azure Storage REST API, and you would have to programmatically check the operational side of it. But the deletion of services or creation of because like for example, we cannot create an handler that will tell us if a container was created. But if a file is created inside that container, that can be checked from the SDKs or from the serverless approach. But just the way I mentioned earlier, that you can use the REST API, which is provided by the Azure, and you can use it to see that a table is deleted or whatever has happened. But again, that would require to be run several times every time that you can see. I think for those kind of advanced topics, we should have taken the session in that way. The Azure Active Directory, I think, Qasim, uh, just help me out with this. I think we can dedicate a complete session for the Azure Active Directory integration and other service integration because right now the flow won't let us go in that direction. Okay. I believe there was a simple question about graph somewhere. Would that be using graph? Um, Aniket, graph, not just the graph. We're not just talking about the graph. It's simply the Azure REST API. You can use graph or you can use any other provider for because the Azure Active Directory also supports token-based authentication, like for example OAuth or OpenID. So we can use any of them. It's the graphing and other service is just for the authentication and for the traversal. But I think the question was, and please correct me if I'm wrong in this. I think the connection was the question was how can we see that a table has been deleted and who deleted it? So I believe it's most of that information is already available in the activity log. Uh, so activity log can tell us because all of the audits are available over here. Like for example, we have this these kind of actions over here. We can use this, or we can use the Azure REST API to actually automate the process and check if something has happened. Yes, I believe there was even an option in the configuration. Like for example, it shows storage v2. I believe I had one of the storage accounts in the time when actually the version 2 was introduced. So at that time it used to show general purpose version 1 over here, and it gave me a button to upgrade it. And it also gave me a warning that you won't be able to get back to version 1 if you ever want it. So that is also one of the things. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Graph is all, and if I'm not wrong, I believe the graph was also integrated inside the Azure Active Directory now. So it's like whenever you're using Azure Active Directory, already using graph. And if you're using Microsoft Graph, you're using Azure Active Directory. So since everything is now Azure, because VSTS also got to be Azure DevOps now. So yeah, exactly. REST API, you can use the HTTP and then you can program it through any HTTP client that you can have. But yeah, you will just need to follow the standards. Like you will have to pass in the same and correct amount of headers, and you will be able to do everything that you would want to. Or you can use the Azure CLI as well. Azure CLI would be much simpler if you want to take my recommendation or suggestion in that. I believe REST API would be much difficult. Oh, connectivity issues as in what, Vishnu? Yes, Aniket. Azure CLI is a very beautiful option. I never wanted to use anything other than PowerShell or Bash, but Azure CLI is definitely beautiful. So while those questions are coming, I'll just go ahead and explore a few more topics. With There are a few more topics that Microsoft just introduced, such as the advanced threat protection and the static website feature. Basically, the static website feature is that you can create static pages such as the HTML, CSS pages, and then you can have the storage, Azure Storage deliver those pages as a website, because you will be able to configure your own custom domain on top of it, uh, and everything else will be taken care of by the Azure Storage itself. However, there is one downside that it will be only static website. You won't be able to do any server-side programming for that. So that is one downside. But overall, if you just want a very static website for your own portfolio or for your own service, you can have it created over here. And it's also in the preview stage and everything like everything else. So just watch out for that. Oh yeah, sorry. Basically, the managed disks and other stuff, I just left it all out all on purpose because it requires a lot of infrastructure level stuff to be discussed, and that is why I left it out. So you are right, because it was not explained. We can have another topic or another time for that, the disks or the SMB protocol, how the disks are mounted in the VMs, and we can definitely. I will work with Kasam, and we will have one of those sessions arranged with the demo. Yeah, Akshay, basically what happens with the access is that's also a really very good question. The access to the files or for the containers happens uh, directly with it can happen in the portal, or you can control it from the SDK as well. Let me just go ahead and head over to the containers and so that I can demonstrate how it actually works. Let's name it initial container, any name with it. Okay, so this is the container for me, and if I go over here and try looking at the access policy for this, basically I'm not trying to upload any file over here. Uh, Otherwise, I would have shown it over from there. So basically, this is where we can control the access for the files. And as you can see over here, I'm not sure if you guys can see it pretty much clearly or not, but uh, the access level for the container is set to private, which means that anonymous access is not authorized. You would have to sign in to the Azure Active Directory and then access the files, and then Azure will take care of the access for you. Otherwise, you can provide access to the blob, which is the single file, which means that you would have to provide the link for that file, and then the users would be able to access that file alone. They won't be able to access everything from the blob or anything from that container. And then there is another level, which means that anonymous access for the container or for the blobs is supported. So these are the levels of the access that Microsoft Azure supports, and we can assign all of these access levels uh, for any of these services. And then another major important thing in this is uh, the shared access signature. These kind of services we had just seen the blob, the services that we just saw, the previous ones, where we would actually be configuring the container, and we will be configuring whether we need to grant access to the container or do we need to grant the access for an individual blob or whatsoever. That is an easier way to grant access for a single file or for whatsoever we need to grant the access for. The recommended way to grant the access for a resource on the Azure storage is via shared access signature. The shared access signature basically means that you will be sharing the token to the users, and they will be utilizing that token in the request or from the HTTP headers, and they will be passing that token in order to tell Azure that they can access the resource. The benefit of this is that you no longer have to grant access or change the access levels for your containers or for your files. You will be creating a token. You will be granting access to, for example, as we can see over here, the allowed services. Like for example, this page actually allows me to create a new access token, and it asks me which of the services do I need to grant access to, what resource types do I need to grant access to, what permissions are there. Like for example, if users can, like for example, if we can grant access to a blob, the way I just mentioned previously, that will also allow them to delete it or edit it or do any other thing that they would want to. But with the shared access signature, what happens is that we now are limiting the users in their scope of what they can do, and not just the scope. We are also setting a timer over for how long they can have this access for the resource. We can also limit the IP addresses that can access that resource. So, for example, if you are trying to provide the access, like for example, if you are a teacher and you're trying to provide the access to your students only who try to access the resource from the school library, then you know which IP address to allow, how long that resource will be available, and which protocols and which of the keys that you are trying to use to sign the signature. And then you can just generate the signature, and it will generate the signatures as well as the connection strings. So you can just either copy the token and pass it, and the users can automatically append this token over to the URL and then have the operation performed. Or you can pass in the complete connection string and they can utilize it as they would want to. And then there are different other SaaS URLs generated, such as for the blob service, the file, the queue, and table, and other services are generated, and you can pass it over. The reason is that this is much configurable. You can configure everything, such as the services, the access levels, the type of access, the time, the IPs, and everything is pretty much accessible, which was not accessible in the other way. So I really think that, and I really wanted to talk about this one feature. So thank you very much for bringing it up. Ah, Aniket, I'm really very sorry, but yeah, this is a very confusing topic. The containers in this are the folders. They are pretty much the directories that are created. They are not the containers that Docker creates. The Docker basically create the containers containers that are containerized uh, programs or the applications. That has nothing to do with this concept. Uh, the containers in this are basically they are used to contain the blobs. So that is what Azure actually had in mind. Exactly, it's totally fine. The other VM containers or the program containers, they are totally entirely different concept. And thank you for bringing the topic up. I will also talk with Kasam so that we can someday talk about the web app for containers as well. That is also an amazing topic to talk about, and it would be really very nice to have you guys over there for that webinar as well. So please, if you guys have any further questions, please do go ahead and ask me. I think we should wrap up. Kasam, are you there?
Yes, Afzal. I think it's now 1 or 2 minutes are still remaining. So, do you
Exactly.
guys have any questions for Afzal? Okay, so would like to update with some like for the upcoming webinars. Like we do have a webinar for DevOps that would be presented by Mr. Hardik Mistry, is a Microsoft MVP, and it is in morning 9:30 a.m. IST. Morning 9:30 a.m. We do have two webinars tomorrow. So and evening it is Azure Service Fabric. That is again at 6 p.m. And on coming Monday, like the very next day, we do have an session for Azure Machine Learning, and it would be presented by Mr. Daniel Salim. He is also an Microsoft MVP. So the three webinars are lined up tomorrow and day after tomorrow. So please kindly like plan your stuffs accordingly. I
Mhm.
think Afzal, there is one more question came in.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. My table storage. Sanjay, do you mean table storage, the offline, the Azure Storage Explorer?
Sanjay, you can unmute yourself, like if you want to ask the question directly. That's fine.
Okay. So basically, yeah, I do have the Azure Storage Explorer opened over here right in front of me. Let me just go back over here, try to access the key. This is the connection string. Let me just create a quick connection for you guys. Use the connection string next. If I just try to access it from over here, we already have it over here. So basically what this will provide us with, unlike you can see over here, we cannot access the tables directly. So the tables can be easily accessed from the Azure Storage Explorer. We can create the tables, we can access the tables, we can read what is inside, we can even store the values. Like for example, if I load this one, let's see if it had something stored. I doubt that, just for the sake of simplicity. No data is available, but we can just simply go ahead, create tables. We can even add some data to the tables that we have and perform all that kind of stuff. But if you meant to say that can we import the data from other databases or other database engines such as SQL Server or other stuff, that is possible, but that would be time consuming and it would be difficult because the SQL Server or other databases, they are relational databases, and this is a NoSQL database. Even from the MongoDB or from other services which are NoSQL in nature, it won't have that much of a benefit. So, but it is definitely possible, and you can do it. You're welcome.
Okay, I think we can now end up the
So, any
session.
other question?
Pardon?
No.
Pardon? Please come
Yeah,
again,
it's totally
Afzal.
perfect.
Okay.
No, no, I didn't say anything.
Okay, so thank you, Afzal, for today's informative session. It was really interesting, and many of the things got cleared with a nice question and answer sessions too. And thank you guys for putting up such interesting questions again. Thank you, Afzal. We will surely plan out for some of the topics which we discussed today for future webinars. We have September, we have all the slots
Yes,
blocked. So I will request Afzal to give his dates from his hectic schedule for the month of October, and we will plan out some more interesting topics to be come out with. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Afzal. Thanks for the great session.
thank
Thank
you
you
for
all.
having us.
Bye bye.